Yes, now it's recording. So, welcome to Universal God Message of Peace. And I'm Lee Weissman. And this is Dr. Laleh Tunter. And uh, and uh, and I don't know, what's your official title? What should we go?
Khalid Zaheer.
Khalid Zaheer. I
Yes.
yeah, Sheikh. Um,
No, no,
is
no. Well, normally my name is preceded by the title doctor.
Doctor. Okay,
Yeah.
Doctor Zaheer. Okay, so Dr. Zaheer. And I suggested this topic, so I get the privilege of introducing it. So I suggested the topic of talking about sermonizing, and about what makes a good sermon, what people should talk about in sermons. And the reason why I raised this was because I was probably puzzling over this issue at at the moment that we talked about it, and I thought, yes, let's talk about this. I'm going to give you actually a little historical background. It's interesting. Um, Jewish rabbis did not give sermons um, regularly until about the 19th century. Up until the 19th century, rabbis would basically address their whole communities only twice a year. Community rabbis, only twice a year. Usually before two big holidays, before Passover and before Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, they would give a big sermon, right? That was the big sermon of the year, and it would always be very long, right? It would be very long, very complex, and everybody would come to hear it, and those were the two times a year. Now the rest of the year, there were wandering preachers. There were people who would uh, their job was they were professional speakers, and they would come and they would travel from town to town, and if they were, and they would get a reputation as being, kind of talented speakers, and they would be invited to come. Some of them were speakers, some were storytellers, some of them they were very fiery, right? They were, they were the fire and brimstone types, who would come. And some of them were softer, and they were softer, harder, whatever different kinds and they would come, and they would collect they would collect donations the next day, because usually it was on Shabbat, so they could collect, and people would give them donations, and they would get a place to stay and so forth. Then they would travel on to the next town. They would go and they would speak there, which was very good because you could give the same sermon 100 times, right? Because you're going to different towns. And so, if you had three or four good ones, right, that could last you an entire year, right? So those guys, and of course, if you've given everybody's had the same experience. If you've given the same sermon twice or three times, right, it's so much better the third time, right? It's always much better the third time. So imagine how good these would get, right? So these guys were professionals and so on. But nowadays, um, giving sermons has become much more common, right? And now rabbis in synagogues do it every week, and even when people have meetings, right? If people have meetings, they expect to have a little bit of what we call a devar Torah or a drasha, like the word dars, right? Drasha is like a dars, and some sort of little talk, beforehand, and so always trying to do this, and trying to decide what are appropriate, trying to figure out what are appropriate topics. Now, I mean, other kinds of teaching, and Lale knows this well. Normally what I do when I teach is I teach a text, right? So normally I teach a text. So the job is, here's the text, right? Then you explicate, right? You explicate the text and you talk about what the text says, and That's right. That's teaching, but a sermon doesn't work that way, right? Sermon doesn't work that way. You've got, 5, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. If people are completely insane and have that kind of patience, which never happens, I think anything more than 5 or 10 minutes, heaven help you. So I find it very challenging to find things which I think are really uh, appropriate, inspiring, non-political. Now, some people love making, doing political sermons or sermons that have political, especially now in America, because we're in that great moment, right, where it's coming up to elections. So now there's a lot of politicking, um, and uh, and so I'm seeking guidance. And one of the reasons why I wanted to discuss this with you is because um, I feel like Islam has sort of uh, has more kind of limits and guidelines on what constitutes an appropriate khutbah, I think. And so I'm here today as your student.
No,
Uh,
I'm, I'm sure we'll learn from each other, but I think in one way, yes, I think we have a certain advantage because on Fridays we do have to give a khutbah. It's a sermon, and as you rightly said, the time is limited, and I mean it's the same problem here. You struggle to get the attention of those who are there. Uh, but there are, and let me tell you, I keep struggling for topics myself. Incidentally, there's another problem that I have to grapple with. The mosque that I deliver the khutbah of Friday, Jummah, uh, has three different Friday prayers that are done, uh, you know, with a gap of 1 hour each, and it rotates. So, what essentially it means is that I have to address three different groups in 3 weeks. And what worries me is that if I deliver the same khutbah, the same sermon, I may actually be saying the same things to people who were already there in the last khutbah. So
right.
I'm always praying that these people turn out to be a completely different group. Uh, but that's always a struggle. But to be honest, the topics are either beliefs and the mention of beliefs, what they are, what they do to us in our lives, how they impact our lives, and what are their arguments. I think if we come up with topics that focus on beliefs and the mention of them, they turn out to be what we call a good reminder. Because, beliefs by their very nature uh, belong to the domain of the unseen world. And the unseen world, because of the fact that it's unseen, it's it needs to be reminded about every now and then. I mean, the most important, significant belief, obviously, is belief in God. We can't see him. So we need to be constantly reminded of his presence. We need to be reminded about the arguments that lead us to believe that he's there, and what it entails, uh, to believe in God. How should it impact our lives? And I think from there proceed other topics like the important topic of ethics. How are we expected to deal with fellow humans, and what are going to be the consequences if we are not, if we are not doing it the right way. And obviously, as we have been talking about the fact that the ethical principles and teachings also lead us to the law. And when we talk about the law, the Sharia, we talk about the relationship of it with ethics. So, I mean, honestly, there are numerous, if not unlimited, a very long list of possible potential topics of sermons. But I must admit that before every Friday, I'm really worrying, and it's a struggle to actually determine what particular topic should I go for. So I just give you an example. Uh, Last Friday, uh, I don't know why. This is the same thing that happened to you. I was
Mm.
struggling with this question, and it just came to my mind that probably this might turn out to be a decent topic of sermon. What I said was that I get something like 18 minutes to speak.
Mhm.
What I said was that as individuals, we are always facing enemies, and we must know how to deal with our enemies. Uh, and I mentioned that there are two types of enemies. There are those who are in the outside world in the form of humans, and there is an enemy within us. Now, as for the enemies in the outside world, uh, they are apparently enemies, but in actual fact, they're not. Nobody is hopefully a permanent enemy. We have differences. Sometimes differences turn out to be very, very strong, very sharp. But we must know that all so called apparent enemies that we feel are our enemies are potential friends. It's only a matter of trying to overcome the obstacles that we have in our relationship. But we must beware of the real, permanent, lasting, open enemy within us, which is Satan. He is a declared enemy, and therefore we must constantly guard ourselves against him and try to overcome the kind of temptations and whispering that we receive from Satan. So I mean, it just turned out to be a topic which thankfully was able to consume 18 minutes and
Mhm.
was able to attract their attention. But it's always a struggle. I do agree with you.
Yes. I think I've given that sermon. I just no,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I've given this. No, no, but I mean, I think it is a struggle. I think one of the struggles I have is also thinking about like, what do I want the outcome to be? You know, like if for a while, yeah, I had to speak every day. So I had to speak every day for a short time, very short every day. So I thought, okay, well, there are different ways of handling that. Some people they do like they do a kind of like a legal, they talk about two laws every day. Okay, talk about a couple of laws every day. So I thought, okay, so fine, if I'm going to do this, I'll do social laws also. So I came up with a system. So I thought, okay, on I forget what I said. It was like on Mondays and Wednesdays. I think I'm talking about social laws. Okay, Mondays and Wednesdays, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, ritual laws, and then you have Friday. I had it all worked out. So I started to talk about you know I was talking about gossip. That was my big topic, was gossip, right? And so I found that I would speak, I would talk about gossip, and so and there's lots of different rules and regulations about gossip, what you can say in this situation and that situation, and then immediately, and then I would stop, and then the prayers would stop, and everybody would start gossiping. I was start gossiping, and I thought to myself, okay, well, I guess that didn't work. So, you know, or or I would talk about, or I would talk about, about the importance of, of not speaking during prayers, and making sure that people had proper focus during prayer, and talking about different ways that one can have more focus and everything else. And the moment I stopped talking, everybody started talking during the prayers, and that was, and, and and I get very frustrated. I get very frustrated. Um, you know, and so, you don't know whether it's, am I not delivering the message properly? Am I not modeling properly? Am I not, it's it's really quite the challenge. I mean, um, you know, because really, I believe that ultimately, when you're teaching religion, it's really, do as I do, not as I say, right? In the sense that I think there's a certain sense that people observe you, and they learn a lot from how you behave with people, from how you behave in prayer. They learn a lot from you that way. And I think that that's important. And I think that's something to be very, very, very aware of. But then when, what you say, I think people, I think it doesn't always do what you want it to do.
I
That's
know. I agree with you, Rabbi Wiseman. I hope you agree with me. The the way the Almighty has designed um, the nature of human beings, um, not everybody is going to be impressed by every speaker. It seems that some people are impressed by some speakers, orators, and not by others. And others somehow find other ways of expressing ideas more interesting. Over the years, I've tried to convince myself while I'm speaking that, look here, not everybody is going to be interested in what you're saying, but if you are able to get the attention of 10, 20% of the audience, uh, that's a good percentage. That's a good success rate. Um, but I think one important thing, I'm coming to the topics that we must go for, which we must keep emphasizing is, and this obviously, um, while you're talking, it impacts or ought to impact you as well, is to be truthful no matter what.
Mhm.
That is, you speak the truth and you try to understand and learn the truth no matter where it comes from. And I think one of the important things that helps in at least making an earnest attempt to do so is to realize and to be reminded of the fact that God knows what you are thinking, what your intentions are, and the way you are approaching others. I think it's one of the areas where uh, s- we humans lack, particularly when it comes to uh, differences of opinion, when it comes to dealing with people who are uh, the others. You know, uh, it so happens that we turn out to be unfair while dealing with people who are others, whether belonging to another family, another nation, another religion. Uh, but it seems from the text that God wants us to be absolutely fair and truthful. So probably it's an important subject that needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Um, yeah, I think that's very true. And also, I think the truthfulness, I think that, the truthfulness also comes in also saying, important to be able to say when you don't know. I think that,
That's right. Absolutely.
you know,
I agree.
you know, I think that's also, I think that sometimes what I try to do is I try to share my struggles with things also. Like for example, if there's a verse or something where I'm having difficulty with it, right? And I've looked at the commentaries and I still have difficulty with it, I may share that and say, look, this is difficult. This is not, this is very difficult. One of the things that strikes me. You said, different people, different speakers appeal to them. That's so true. Um, I mentioned that, in the old days, there used to be these very popular, kind of fiery preachers, these guys. And there's still a few of them today. I have no patience for it. I have no I'm just telling the truth. I have no patience for it. But there are the people, who like who I have a friend who loves being told that he's going to go to hell. He loves it. It's like he says he just, the more somebody tells him he's going to go to hell, the better he likes it. It's just, yeah, and he wants everybody to be going to hell. He says this one's going to hell and this one's going to hell, and that one's going to hell, and he just thinks that's great. Um, Me, I would much rather be told how not to go to hell. Would be kind of like that would be a much better way. I just very quite going to gently tell me, please tell me, like how not to, as opposed to tell me, all the, about how I'm doomed. But some people really like that stuff. They want people. They like a sort of macho fire, and I have to work on that. I got the, I got the fist, but that's all.
Rabbi Wiseman, I don't know whether you would agree with me or not. You know, the taste of the common man uh, in what he or she is interested in listening to and what impresses the individual depends to quite an extent on the people that the individual is listening to.
Mm.
Uh, I mean, um, if you've been listening to, uh, in most cases, people who deliver, as you mentioned, fiery speeches, you somehow develop a taste for it. Uh, Honestly, it's not just that I'm not impressed by fiery speakers anymore. Over the years, I have come to the conclusion that they are a part of the problem. They are
Yeah,
the people who have caused their listeners to become biased, to have strong views about others, um, kind of openness that we would like to have in individuals when it comes to difference of opinion is missing. And this taste for listening to fiery speeches and to, as you mentioned, extreme statements of people going to hell, and that people are doomed, and the others are all, hated by the Almighty. People start liking these kind of messages, which I think is, to me, it's primarily because, to begin with, there are religious people, many of them, who have somehow mastered this style of presentation, which
yes,
is emotionally charged. And I think the biggest victim of these presentations is your intellect. You stop thinking,
right,
unfortunately.
right. Yeah, well, it's not intellectually, it's not made to appeal to your intellect. It's made to appeal to your emotions. And it's interesting you said the other, because what's amazing about that style is that the other is so gigantic. I mean, they're so, I mean, the, I mean, the group that those speakers tend to represent, often is not much more than themselves. I mean, becomes, they don't like these people, they don't like these people, they don't like these people, they for sure don't like anybody, so the scope of what's acceptable for them it becomes so narrow. Um, and it's also, I think the other thing is, I think that a lot of times with that style, truth goes out the window very quickly. It's very easy when you're fired up like that and you're doing that, it's very easy to say stupid things. It's and almost inevitable that you're going to say stupid things because you're trying to get a rise out of people. The goal is to get an emotional rise out of people, and to do that, you don't necessarily have to be truthful. And it's really damaging. And I see it. It's interesting. I see it on all fronts right now, right at this moment in history. At this moment in history, I see that style dominating, not just. I mean, it's certainly got a big foot in Judaism now. It's certainly got a big foot in Islam now, but even in Hinduism, like
Oh, yes.
even right, all of a sudden, I mean, all of a sudden, you have these, you have Hindu and Buddhist teachers, who are like, who are like adopting this kind of strange, this kind of thing, and I feel like it's also, I think that ultimately it's certainly not. I don't think it's how the prophets communicated. You
Yeah,
know,
you
it doesn't mean they couldn't be harsh. We say Moses can be harsh. Actually, Moses sometimes is harsh, and this is, but that's not that's not his ordinary way of teaching, right? That's not the ordinary way of teaching. Is not to sit there and to scream at people and to yell at them and to belittle them, or to belittle others in order to make your audience feel good, right? That's the other thing is I'm going to make you feel good because you're part of the group that's right and everybody else is wrong. I feel like it's very dangerous. It's a particularly dangerous style, and I think very very harmful.
I think you've pointed out something very important, and I think that needs to be clarified. We do find very strong statements in the text, in the Quran too,
Yeah.
and that is what causes people to feel that that's the way to go about it. The fact of the matter is that each of those statements has a context. There are some people who were particularly evil and stubborn, who had to be addressed that way. But that is not the normal, desirable way of putting across the message. I just wanted to say one thing, particularly when you are talking about religion. I'm sure it's true for other disciplines as well, but religion in particular should specialize in solving those intellectual problems which put together make this life a puzzle.
Hmm.
God's message comes to solve that puzzle. When you come to this world and you get an understanding of your environment and yourself, there are some very serious questions that you confront. Who created us? Why did he create me? Why are there so many problems? Why do I have an understanding of right and wrong? Why is there so much of discrimination and so on? Why do people die? What is going to happen after death? Now, it is only our Creator who can answer those questions. And I think, no matter what religion you belong to, it is your duty as a person who is to present the religious message to help people solve the puzzle, get answers to these serious, sometimes disturbing questions. And if you are getting into an emotional, um, you know, sermonizing process, you're not helping in solving the puzzle. You're actually making the puzzle even more deep. That's what my understanding is.
That's a very nice way of putting it. Because the human experience is not easy to navigate. You know,
Absolutely.
it's not easy to navigate. And 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 here you have these books, here you have these books of guidance, and here you have these traditions that are really, meant to guide people through that and to help people to like live better. And if you're not doing that, right, if you're not doing that, then you're not doing the job. I mean, that's the goal of it. The goal of it is to help people kind of figure out how to live in this world, understand those puzzles, and like, why are we here? You know,
That's
like,
true.
why are we here? Why do we have to, why is it difficult, right? Which is not, why are we here? Why do we have to suffer? Why do we have to be sick? And how do we respond to those things? And how do we respond to other people in those situations? And 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 I feel like a lot, unfortunately, um, I feel like there's a lot of failure, to kind of give people like really basic guidance about the things which are important. And whereas, to be honest, you know, I once heard a sermon on crushed ice. It was on whether or not you can crush ice on Shabbat. And it was probably a 25-minute sermon about the laws of crushing ice. And I thought to myself at the end of it, I said, am I a better person for this? Is anybody in this room a better person for this? Is is our life transformed? I mean, and, and I'm sure there was a very interesting topic for the person, but and there were clearly different schools of thought, and there were the ice crushers and the non-ice crushers, and that made some people feel good because I'm not an ice crusher. I never crushed ice. But I mean, but we have to really think, is that really helping the person to be a better human being, to make better families, to make better communities, you know,
Absolutely.
and is it purifying their heart? I mean, that's the other, you know, I find that a lot of times the internals, of purification of the heart, of really talking about 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 what it means to spiritually purify yourself, and those things get really neglected, in favor of all sorts of things which are tangential.
I,
Um,
I I agree. This really is a serious problem. And although all religious people speak about the important objective of controlling, disciplining our ego, but what happens is that when we are talking about our respective religious messages, one way or the other, we are actually, trying to satisfy our ego and feels comfortable with the fact that I am better than others. You know, my group is better than all other groups, which is
right.
completely the opposite
The
of
opposite of
what.
what you. Yep.
That's right. I mean, the purification of heart, as you've rightly pointed out, which should be the ultimate objective, is ignored. And I honestly, over the last few years, I whenever I talk about or listen to or read about a certain religious topic, I ask myself whether it has actually helped me in solving the puzzle, in understanding
Yeah.
the design of the
Yeah.
Almighty, His plan. And I think this is what we must emphasize. And a very important thing you mentioned earlier, Rabbi Wiseman, was that we must have the um, openness and honesty to acknowledge and admit that I've not understood it.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, because that is what would lead you to learn more. Uh, that is what is going to lead you to look for people who would solve the problem that you are facing. And I think
Right.
that, to be talking about sermons, I think this is what we must communicate to others, that we must think on those lines.
Yeah. It's funny. When I was a teacher, very often what would happen is when I taught seniors, and they would often come late to class. It was they come late to class. So who would I yell at? I would yell at the students who came early to class, right? Because the ones who came on time, right? And they'd go, "Where is everybody?" And they'd look at me like, I don't know. I'm here on time. Why are you yelling at me?" Right? And I feel to a certain extent, we treat people who come to pray that way, right? I mean, who are you yelling at? You're yelling at who are you yelling at? You're yelling at the people who say, you know what? Life is a puzzle. I'm coming here to figure it out. I just want a few minutes, right? I want a few minutes to pray. I want a few minutes to connect to my creator. And I'm coming here. He says that's why they're coming, right? They're coming because they're trying to figure it out, right? They're coming because they understand that there's something beyond their understanding, and they want to connect to that thing. Um, and the job is to help them and ourselves to be able to connect to it. Um, in the most honest way possible. I like these are the puzzle. It really is a puzzle. I mean,
Yeah,
trying to figure out, what we're all doing here, and what we're supposed to be doing here. And
absolutely.
nobody's got it all figured out, but but we should be, working and struggling together to figure it out. And if you have that position, you know, I always pray, honestly, before I speak. Uh, I always pray very hard, you know, please, 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 just keep my ego out of it. Because once my ego is there, once my ego is invested, that's it. Like, and then it's me, 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 me. And so I really have to work hard. I mean, it's for myself, I have to work hard, to make sure that
Absolutely,
I get
absolutely.
myself out of the way.
This question of puzzle, um, I often feel very uh, disappointed, um, that many religious people have a tendency to think and to claim that they were lucky that they were born to such and such a religion, thereby implying that all others were unlucky.
Mhm.
And that in turn implies, God forbid, that God, the designer, he planned it in a way that some people were given to be lucky by the accident of birth, and others were unlucky. I think, no matter what we do in our sermons and our ways we teach and preach, we must tell everyone that, for God's sake, communicate with others politely, with an open mind, and be humble. Because, as I said, or else you will not be able to properly solve the puzzle the way your creator wants it to be solved. To me, it seems that he has, well, this expression may not be good, but he has thrown us in a situation, in a life, in a
Yes.
in a trial, where he wants us to struggle and find the truth. And that is, I think, is the path of faith and the path of religion. And the text and divine revelation helps us to navigate and to find our path. And it's an ongoing process. It should never end. There is no ultimate. height that you might reach and say that, oh, I've got it now, and there's no further struggle for me to undertake.
Yeah. That you know, the helping people kind of understand the value of the other is, I think, like a fundamental. It's just it, it's an absolute fundamental, I think, in the way that we approach the world now. Um, I feel like there was probably a time when people lived in isolated communities and where they didn't have contact with each other, and you could kind of get away with that, right? You could be in your place in the middle of nowhere, right? And you could say, you know, thank God I was born in this holy, amazing land of
Yeah,
wherever it is that I am, right? And that
that's true.
I am the grandson of of so and so, right? That works great. But now that we live in a world that is we live in a world that's so interconnected, it just it's just and we see that we're not going to be able to solve the puzzles and problems of this world by ourselves. Okay, this is not just not going to happen. It's not the way it's going to work. It means we're going to have to learn how to deal with each other. And the consequences of not learning how to deal with each other are becoming very, very clear,
Yeah,
right? Very, very clear. Then people are going to have to learn to deal with each other and also understand. And I say this with the full heart, that the plan of God is that we have to figure it out together. Okay,
yes,
He threw us in this world with all different kinds of people. He didn't. He the the fantasy that somehow or another he really wanted everybody to be the same doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
absolutely,
It doesn't accord with nature. It doesn't accord with anything in the universe. There's nothing in the universe that would imply that is God's intention, right?
absolutely.
So that being the case, we have to be with the program, okay? Because if we're not, we're not with God's program. Okay, God's program clearly is that we have to deal with each other. Everybody has to deal with each other, and learning how to do that with decency and respect, and like us.
That's right, absolutely,
Don't
absolutely.
joke. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. I mean, I mean, this is the way to do it. So thank you to Lali for making this possible, and organizing us, and
It's very kind of her. I'm sure it's a great service, and I'm loving it. It's an opportunity that I've been looking forward to getting for a very long time. I'm thankful to her that she's provided us with this platform. I just wanted to say one thing, probably the last thing before we hand the mic over to her and she does the final concluding remarks. I'm always fond of mentioning. Probably it was Bertrand Russell who said it, and I think this is something that we must be careful about. Uh, we religious people, because what those people who are not religious are saying about us is very important to be taken seriously. And what he said was actually right. He said that, you know, all societies have good people and bad people. Good people do good things, and bad people do bad things. Now, what he went on to say was that it goes to the credit of religion and religion alone that it sometimes causes good people to do bad things.
yes, nicely
Wow.
said. Yeah, yeah,
And this is something honestly correct, and something that we religious people must worry about.
yeah. Yes, yes. I totally agree with you. Yep.
We probably are now inviting a silent participant to become non-silent.
Oh, thank you so much, both of you. You've just it's just been amazing listening to you both and sharing your wisdom. Every point that you both mentioned is just so beautiful and inspiring. And may you be, you know, an inspiration for all the, you know, Muslim communities, Jewish communities. May we all work on ourselves. And, you know, I think what you've mentioned is about the ego getting in the way is a really big thing. And, you know, all those people who have the opportunity to sermonize and to teach, it's a huge challenge, and we have a responsibility for the people, to God, who has entrusted us with that position, to deliver our words in a way that is, you know, impactful. And it reminds me of a verse in the Quran where God asks Moses, peace be upon him, to go to Pharaoh and to talk to him in a gentle speech. You know, Pharaoh is the what does he represent to everybody? And Allah asks him to talk to him with gentle speech so that he may listen. And yeah, I just wonderful. I feel speechless, and I'm not personally very good at speaking myself, so always trying to work on that. I remember I used to have to give some sermons at the Universal God Center because I couldn't find somebody else that would do it for me. So I really didn't want to do it. So what I did was, in fact, I just sat on the floor with everybody. And it was great because we had Buddhists and Jews and Muslims and Christians, very, very different people sitting together. And I remembered a time where I went to a sermon, and the preacher, he spent a whole hour talking about blowing on your food, how it was wrong to blow on your food and how you would go to hellfire. And I remember after that thinking, how could this 1 hour could have been used, you know, in a way that I asked myself the same question: how did this help me? You know, and so I was really worried. I didn't want to be in that position to do something like that and have somebody else think like that. So instead, I sat down and I actually made it an interactive thing, and everybody loved it. So we spoke 1 week about compassion, 1 week about forgiveness, 1 week about kindness, and all of the virtues and values really that bring all of us together. And just final point, and then I guess we're running out. I think I just want to end with a little prayer and ask that, first of all, thank our Creator for the opportunity to have these discussions, because all praise, glory, thanks be to him. And I'm so grateful to both of you. This is so beautiful to have these conversations with you. May God help us all to always be aware of his presence while we're speaking, and to purify our hearts and our intentions so that it's not about us and our glory or fame, and it's about bringing people closer to their Creator and have a personal relationship with him, and so to, you know, serve him to the best of our ability, and to take that opportunity, whatever God creates for us, to promote kindness, peace, justice, and you know, love, which means, you know, not belittling others and mocking people, but instead trying to make peace in any way we can. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, shalom.
Wa alaikum assalam.